Welcome back, everyone, to the W Sports Podcast. Jimothy, the best co-host in the business, Tubby, is back at it again as we break down all the news and notes from the NFL world, baseball, and even college football world this week. So there's a lot going on. And yes, we are going to be talking about the draft. If you listened to last week's draft prep episode, hopefully you didn't miss it because a lot of great insights going into 3 incredible days of the draft. A record-setting day, Tubby, for the draft. Over 700,000, last I heard, people attended it. So Tubby, how much did you enjoy that draft?
I was I loved the draft. I mean, I thought it was a great draft, super deep draft. And then when it ended, I was super sad.
You're like, oh, now we're done until OTAs.
Yeah, I got 365 days until the next draft. What are we talking about here now?
That's true. And yeah, we'll get to it. We might get to it. We're going to get Tubby's mindset of who he thinks will be the number 1 draft pick next year. It can never be too early to start thinking through that, but this was a very productive weekend, and you were up in the Packers. For those who didn't see it, last year the draft was in Kansas City. This year it was in Detroit, and next year it's at Lambeau Field there with the Packers. I wonder how that city is going to hold up to 700,000 plus. I bet they get close to 1 million.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of people for that kind of smaller town.
Yeah. I mean, that's more than the town probably itself. I don't know about the metro, if they call it a metro, but that city.
I mean, Green Bay, yeah, it's not super big. I mean, Lambeau is pretty much the center point of that city.
I'm going to look it up. How many people do you think live right now there?
I'm going to say 650.
650?
Yeah.
All right. If I can ever get to the Wikipedia page, I'm going to tell you the answer. But this is it's giving me everything. But oh my gosh, that can't be right.
Is it way lower?
It says 100,000, but I want to see the whole area, not just.
Honestly, I wouldn't doubt it. I felt like I was really high. I mean, it's Wisconsin. There's not a. I mean, it's not one of the major hubs of Wisconsin. Like a Milwaukee.
Very true.
So I mean, it doesn't shock.
Bro, 100,000. I need to know what the area is, but I don't know. That's I don't know how that city is going to hold up to potential close to 1 million fans going there, and people flock from all over the country, so that is going to be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if I have the financial ability to do it, next year would be the place for me. Just because I mean, it's in Green Bay, at Lambeau. I'd be there for all 3 days.
It would be, you'd be front row. Like, listen, I repping the W Sports Podcast, get you some swag out there, really. Interviewing people. How great of a pick was that?
Yeah. I would. I'd have it all, the whole shebang.
Yeah, that would be fun. Well, we'll get into some of the quick news and notes of the draft that led into the draft that actually probably influenced some of the picks and decisions along the way. We saw this. Lions got their receiver. They actually shelled out quite a bit of money before the draft, with Amon St. Brown getting 4 years, $120 million. I mean, you think T. Higgins is asking for a trade? I mean, I don't know how they're going to be able to pay him, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all of these guys, because Amon-Ra just got $30 million per year, which is crazy. Penei Sewell, same thing, highest offensive tackle in the league at 4 years, $112 million. How good are these? I mean, are these good pickups?
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely essential for them to re-sign both those guys. There's no way they could let either of them walk. Now the big question comes down for them is Jared Goff. Contracts, coming up. How much are they willing to pay him? How long are they willing to pay him? I mean, he's not super old. He's 29, 30 years old. So he's still got quite a bit, I think, left in him. But you also got to look, a couple years down the road, who else do you have to pay in the next few years? Aiden Hutchinson will have to be paid. Jahmyr Gibbs, even though he just got drafted, they have to think ahead. So it'll be interesting with how big of these contracts they gave these two guys. How much are they willing to give Goff? And maybe that window with Goff is starting to maybe shrink a little bit, just because they had to dish out a hefty chunk of change.
Yeah, quite a bit. And Jared Goff, people are like, oh, he's not worth getting it, like doing that. His average QBR over the last couple of years has been 63 and 60 with Detroit. His first year wasn't as great as he's getting used to the system, but he has been above average production level when it matters, not just putting up a ton of yards and touchdowns, but he is making good decisions when it matters most.
Mm-hmm.
So he seems like the right kind of fit for this franchise. So they're going to have to definitely think long-term on this. This is the team that we'll get into the draft and stuff like that. I'm sure with them, I felt like they had a good draft overall, like some of the ways they do their picks. But A.J. Brown also went out, signed 3 years, $96 million deal with $84 million guaranteed, which is just a crazy amount of money. But he is talented enough. I feel like this is a no-brainer. The Eagles needed to do this, especially after last year's collapse, to really just help the fans know going into the draft, hey, we are planning to win right now.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was. I think, another one of those where you had to pay the guy, because do we know if Devonta Smith is a number one wide receiver yet? No. I mean, do we think he probably could? Maybe, but AJ Brown is that guy, that go-to guy. It's just kind of crazy that they have this type of money after they paid Jalen Hurts how much money, they paid Lane Johnson how much money, Saquon Barkley how much money, Darius Slay, he had to take a pay cut last year, to stay with the team, but they still paid him a decent amount of money. Jordan Mailata, he has a decent contract, so it's kind of like, wait, where'd you get the money?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So
a
couple of those big deals. The other one that happened that people may have heard in the area, in the sports world of NFL anyways, was Kansas City Chiefs have kind of made it outwardly known that they may have to look at other options outside of staying where they are right now. Now, the funny thing was, Tubby, I just sent you that image or that video of Xavier Worthy doing the tour of the Chiefs facility, and someone made the comment like, wow, I mean, the culture shock of going from the Texas Longhorns college, facilities all the way to Kansas City. He's probably thinking, I thought I was supposed to be going up, not down. Now, the last 2 years, if you guys didn't know, Chiefs have been in the bottom 2 as far as facilities go, rankings with players and coaches. So there's definite need for improvement. And I don't think, for the record, people are like, the Chiefs are going to move in the middle of their dynasty. I don't see them moving outside of the Kansas City metro area. I just see them opening the door to seeing what does it look like where there is potentially more money in the city, more money in the county, that kind of thing, on the Kansas side. And people are like, well, it's still Kansas City Chiefs. It is, but it will definitely change part of the identity that they have with the Chiefs right now. And I will say, because of Clark Hunt, there's not a bad seat in that stadium. You cannot build a stadium that way. So if they build a new stadium, it will not be the same. So people just need to understand that doors can open somewhere else, and just ask other franchises, ask other cities what it's like when your team leaves.
Yes, I mean, look at St. Louis.
Yeah,
what's the Rams left? I mean, the Battlehawks are averaging more attendance than some of these bigger franchise, NFL franchises. You got them having to open up the upper bowl because there's so many people. It's one of those, but yet Rams, they go out to LA, and now they're just they're desperate for another team there, and they got it with the UFL, but it's not the same. It's not going to bring in the same amount of money that an NFL franchise would do. So I mean, Kansas City, Missouri, they probably maybe want to try to figure something out, because you don't want them moving across the border over to Kansas City, Kansas, and you going, well, we had them at one point.
Yeah, you just gotta be careful, because if you're not, here you go. Let me see, where is it right now? Truman Sports Complex, right? If it goes in an area, I think it's only like 25 minutes away, but it just feels a world of a difference over there. So we'll see what happens. The reason why most people are joining the podcast today isn't to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs relocating to Kansas City, right? It is to talk about the draft itself. So, Tubby, you said this was a really deep draft. All the analysis you put on the front and all the hard work and the passion that you put into it, we as listeners, me right here, just getting to absorb it as much as I can, helps me feel like a more informed fan, which I really appreciate when I'm watching the draft with other people. I'm like, this is a good pick, and here's why. You helped me get there. So,
appreciate it.
Early on in the draft, I mean, do you want to start with your Packers, or do you want to save your Packers for later?
I mean, I'll just go ahead and get them out the way.
Okay, let's talk about your Packers. Okay.
We'll go ahead and talk about the Packers, and we can kind of go with what happened at the beginning of the draft.
Oh, yeah. I think that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, Jordan Morgan wasn't my first choice. I don't think it was a bad pick. I think it was a good pick for them, round one. maybe they could have got him in the second round, but I think analysts were lower on him than the actual NFL teams were. So I think they were thinking, we got to take our guy here. I thought Cooper DeJean probably would have been the pick. There's a couple offensive linemen that I probably would have picked over him. Graham Barton went the next pick after. Tyler Guyton went a couple picks later. Kingsley Suamatia, he went later in the second round. So I was probably higher on him than most teams were. But I felt like, Morgan's a good pick. A lot of people are concerned about the short, somewhat short arms, but the Packers don't seem to have a problem with that. I mean, Dave Bakhtiari didn't have overly long arms. Brian Bulaga, shorter arms. Zach Tom has shorter arms. So for them, it didn't really matter. They think the athleticism will hold up. Day 2 picks, absolutely. I love the first couple picks. Edgerrin Cooper, he was my favorite player in this draft. I saw him and I thought this kid is immediately could come in and just be one of the top inside linebackers in the NFL. I think he does it all: coverage, run game. He had 8 sacks last year.
Yeah,
he's someone that just does it all. And so they got him day 2. I was super stoked about that. Javon Bullard, another kid that I was, high on. I think I had him as my second or third safety in this year's draft. So I think he reminds me a lot of Javon Holland, and super fast, not afraid to come up, make the hits, can play nickel, can play deep safety. Kind of has that versatility there. The next couple picks, Marshawn Lloyd. I'm not mad about it. I think he's a good receiving back, but wasn't one of the backs that I would have taken at that point. But then the Tyron Hopper, the fourth pick, of day 2, I wasn't overly excited about. He has a lot of inefficiencies in his game. He's not super strong. I would have much rather than go with a guy like Peyton Wilson from NC State, who I think the fact that he dropped as far as he did, and Steelers got absolute steal because the kid is just a high motor player. And I know the injuries, he had 2 ACL injuries on the same knee, probably played a big factor into, teams passing on him. But other than that, I mean, day 3, I think it was a lot of the same. Gutekunst, I think they see where they're at right now. They took guys early on that could help out the team, pretty soon. Day 3 is a lot of, okay, we're going to take guys that we think that we can mold into really good play, productive players, potential starters down the road. And when you see Packers take a guy in the 4th, 5th round offensive lineman, you can almost go ahead and pencil him in to be a starter in a couple of years, because they find a way to find these guys day 2, late, draft picks that end up being, all pros. I mean, David Bakhtiari was a 5th round pick. Zach Tom was a 4th round pick. Josh Sitton, TJ Lang were both all pros, and they were 5th and 6th round picks. So I think that I love the pick with Monk from Duke. He plays kind of everywhere along the line. My favorite pick, and it's going to sound crazy because it was the 7th, their last pick, Kalen King. This kid, he fell so far because before last college football season started, he was penciled in as a top 15 player. And he had a rough year. And I think the Packers, they're like, we saw him fall 7th round. And we weren't initially going to take him. Then we're like, we have to. I mean, the potential is so high there. We get him in here and we can, fix some things in his game. We're talking about a potential starter because this kid was looked at as a top 15 pick before the college football season started. So that was one of my big steals for the draft was Kalen King, 7th round. Like I said, a lot of people, had him penciled in. Oh, you're taking him. You probably have a top 15 pick in the 1st round in this year's draft. Just so happened he went 255.
A little bit later.
The Packers, potentially got them a starter if they can, fix some of his, shortcomings.
I think it was crazy to see how often the Packers were on the clock. It was just, oh my gosh. And I do think that they did a good job of going and filling some of the needs. And like you said, the Packers do a really good job culture-wise of developing players for the long term, especially on the offensive side. So couldn't agree more. I still like the Marshawn Lloyd pick just because I think of but I'm thinking of it more along the lines of the special teams updated rules,
Mhm.
and does he play a factor in that? It seemed like him and Rice for USC were doing a really good job
Yeah.
of creating that space, and maybe that's where he really finds his spot. Hopefully, we'll see with those new rules. So, when any other final thoughts before I jump onto the Chiefs?
No, I mean, I gave the Packers a B plus in this draft.
Okay,
I thought they did solid. Wasn't one of the best, but it was just kind of right there. A good solid draft. And like I said, they took a couple of guys I probably wouldn't have taken if they would have went maybe a couple of different directions. That maybe talking about A minus, but Goodicus has done a good job over the last couple of years of drafting, so I'm not too worried about it. Like a lot of fans are, freaking out because we didn't get Cooper DeJean, or we didn't get this guy, or we didn't get that guy. I'm like, hey, they picked the guys that they think that are going to be good, and they have had a good track record the last couple of years in picking. Not worried about it.
Yeah, that's a great mindset to go into it. So for the Chiefs, obviously, the big one was their first round pick. We've already mentioned him, Xavier Worthy. I loved texting you back, and they're like, Adonai Mitchell fell to the second round, in which we can get to that here in a minute. But he was upset about it, as I was, and I was like, he ran like what, a 4.34? That's basically a cow. Like, what are we even trying? So I think I loved, honestly, their first. They didn't have a lot of picks, but I did like the Worthy pick because when you pair him with the skill sets they have, and to get Jared Wiley, I do like him as a tight end, and maybe I don't know that he is that guy, but that Chiefs have to start thinking, who is that guy to help take some of that pressure on the tight end role off of a guy like Travis Kelce, who does have quite a bit of mileage on him, and I do like that pick. Kingsley also, I like that pick. They traded up to get him. Overall, I think it's more top heavy. The Chiefs do what they did. They got another corner later on with the guy from Tennessee,
Kamal Hayden.
Thank you. Yeah. So you see that my biggest wins though was they got someone at receiver who has speed like MVS. Maybe he can catch the ball. And then they got a new tackle, which I think, as young as he is, has the potential to be coached up and to be a solid tackle in this game.
Yeah, no, I like their draft for the most part. If you guys know, I'm not the biggest fan of Xavier Worthy. I have a lot of problems with Xavier Worthy. I thought A.D. Mitchell would have been the more successful pick, just because, you're talking about a guy that ran a 4.3. He is 6'3", 215 pounds, 200 pounds, whatever. Big, solid, can run, has a really good route tree, has super strong hands, and can make the contested catches in the red zone if you needed to. I guess supposedly there are some character issues with him that just also popped up that, if you watch Chris Ballard talk about it, you just, warning, it's not safe for work. So be careful. But he's like, this is just crazy that we're still listening to these NFL guys, these, draft experts talk, and they're just making up a bunch of crap because we didn't hear any of this from any of his coaches, any of his players, any other NFL teams had, these worries about him. So,
real quick, I have a hard time whenever it's like, well, I heard, and you've like, how much time have you spent with this guy? And they're like, 10 minutes. To compare to guys, coaches, like you said, play teammates who have, they're going to protect the locker room more likely than not because that's what you do. But at the same time, you can tell when a guy is just doing coach speak versus a guy. No. I've been with this guy for 3 years. I recruited this guy in high school. I'd known him longer than that. That just drives me just mad. Just drives me so frustrating.
Yeah, that was my thinking with it. I think there's probably something different just because the wide receiver group was so deep that I think a lot of it was objective. Someone going, I think this guy's the better of them. I think this guy's better, because would I have thought that Xavier Worthy and Xavier Legette would have went higher than A.D. Mitchell and Keon Coleman? Probably not. Maybe Keon Coleman just because he didn't run fast. But I think that, in my rankings, I have both of them higher than both those guys. So I think this year's draft, it was so subjective, especially with the wide receivers. But I think Kingsley was an absolute steal. I had him as my number 6 offensive tackle. I thought he could have potentially pushed, for a first-round pick. He's young. but the kid has so much upside. He was the number one offensive tackle out of high school. He kind of bounced around, started out at Oregon, ended up at BYU. He's also the cousin of Penei Sewell. And all he does is work out with Penei Sewell. And I think he has I think he has the absolute potential to be your starting left tackle for many years if you're able to coach him up right. And Kansas City's pretty good at coaching up some offensive linemen, so I wouldn't worry about that. Jaden Hicks for me was the big steal. I love Jaden Hicks. He was one of my top safeties. In fact, he dropped to the 4th round. I was mad that the Packers didn't take him when they doubled up on safeties. They went with the kid Eric Williams from Oregon. I would have much rather had Jaden Hicks. So whenever he kept on falling, I was like, man, someone's about to get an absolute thumper in the secondary. The kid is big. Well, put some hits on you fast enough to keep up with guys over the middle. I thought if they would have went 80 Mitchell, I would have gave them an A. I gave them an A minus because I still, even with Xavier Worthy, the questions I have, I thought the rest of the draft was so good and such great value. Like Jared Wiley, I mean, the similarities between him and Travis Kelce are pretty crazy. I mean, former high school quarterback, got recruited as a quarterback out of high school, TCU, transitions to tight end. Travis Kelce, quarterback out of high school, played quarterback, transition tight end. I mean, 3rd round pick. It all kind of, the similarities match up. Super athletic kid, super raw at the position, but we've been able to see what they can do.
Talent play against OU the last couple of years in the Big 12. Yeah. The Big 12's produced some really good tight ends.
Yeah, and he was one of those guys that I think it was hard to kind of figure out what you had with them. You're like, man, the potential's high if you can get him at the correct spot and allow him to mature and build into his player. And that's like the perfect spot. I mean, you got Travis Kelce there. You still got Blake Bell. You got a couple other tight ends, that are going to be ahead of him.
Smith too. Yeah.
So he doesn't have to play right off the bat. He can just sit back, learn from all these veterans, and learn from the best tight end in NFL. So I thought they had a really good draft. Like I said, they seem to have the same mindset I do when it comes to drafting most of the time. And so usually I have the Kansas City Chiefs, the last few years a lot higher, just because they seem to like the same guys I like.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. That's a good sign. Real quick before I forget, on the top end, I forgot to mention Trey Hendrickson wanting a trade for the Bengals. This is a team, we can get to their draft too. They went out and got some guys to help Joe Burrow, which I think is great because the 2 times that Joe Burrow, I don't know if you know this, the 2 times that he has been healthy at the end of the year, AFC Championship game minimum. Take care of him. But Hendrickson wanting out is a big loss to this team if they don't get it. So I forgot to do that. I was like, Chiefs could get him. They can't. But if they did, someone's got to get him. He is a beast. So,
especially him saying, either pay me or I'll retire. Trade me, pay me, or I'll retire. That's a big deal because you lose him, your defense just took a massive hit.
Yeah. So apologies going back on some news and notes there, but he's too good of a talent not to mention. So, all right, we got to get to it. A lot of offensive talent taken in this draft in the early on. I got a text message and someone was like, this much offense? And I was like, I know. It is a deep draft. But I think in the next couple of days, you really saw the defensive sway back there. But give me, what was your take on the amount of quarterbacks maybe? Or just what did your initial thoughts? Who won the first round and who absolutely, what were you thinking?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear the Bears won the first round. You get Caleb Williams, best player in the draft, and then you turn around and get, for me, the number 2 wide receiver. And I like I said before, I had him so much closer than Marvin Harrison Jr. than most people did. I thought they were pretty even, honestly. And you get him 9 to pair with your franchise quarterback. To throw on top of that, him having DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet. That that group there, they have set Caleb Williams up for success right off the bat. I thought the Eagles getting Quinyon Mitchell, not having to move up. The fact that all these defensive players slid in the draft was pretty crazy, and a lot of it was due to the run on quarterbacks. We had 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12, and a couple of the positions, a couple of the places were just absolutely crazy. I mean, I didn't expect Bo Nix to be a top 15 pick. I didn't even expect Bo Nix to be a top 25 pick. I thought
First round.
maybe the Broncos or someone would maybe trade back in at the back end of the first round just to be able to get that 5th-year option. I was shocked. I had heard murmurs about the Falcons potentially drafting Michael Penix because they were super high on Michael Penix. And I'm like, I thought it was a smoke screen.
Yeah,
I thought they were just
someone trade up to go get something. Yeah,
messing around. No, they shocked the world. They went out and drafted the quarterback after they just paid their guy $180 million over the next 4 years. And you go out and draft a quarterback who will be 24 in the next week or so. And your GM is saying, well, we're okay with the guy sitting for the next maybe 4 to 5 seasons and learning. I'm like, whoa. So what you're saying is that you draft a guy, and if you let him sit for the final, the whole duration of Kirk Cousins' contract, you're talking about a kid starting his first NFL game without Kirk Cousins getting hurt, outside of that, when he's 28 years old.
I don't buy it for 1 second.
Yeah,
I texted you, when was the last time you saw a top 10 quarterback not play the first round? Not play the first year of their rookie year.
I don't know about play. Philip Rivers is the only one that we know that didn't start for the first couple of years. That was a top 10 pick. That's the last I can think of. But he still played
in front of him.
Yeah, still played 2 games each of those years. So at least he still played. We don't know if that's going to happen. And people are like, well, they don't know what they got out with Kirk Cousins because of the injury. Okay, if that was your concern, then why did you just sign him to a 4-year, $180 million deal with $100 million guarantee? What's the point? If you were concerned that he may not come back, like the guy that you thought, then you don't pay him that type of money. You go out and you draft Michael Penix, and he's your quarterback, because Michael Penix is one of the most NFL ready of the quarterbacks. He doesn't really need to sit a whole lot. We're talking about a guy that entered college football in 2018.
I know. Yeah.
So how much more can he learn behind this guy? Yeah, to me, it was just the first 7 picks. I was like, yeah, this is exactly how I thought it would go. I thought there'd be a little bit more movement. I thought someone would come up, get JJ McCarthy. I thought but last week I was like, I think it was a smoke screen that I think that JJ will drop further in the draft. And, he still was a top 10 pick.
I did expect him to drop more, but like you said, people didn't necessarily trade back in the way we thought. And once Penix goes before, like if Penix doesn't go as early, well, I don't think JJ goes as early. I just don't.
And I don't think Bo goes as early either.
Yeah, okay. Let me ask you this: would you rather be the Broncos and have Bo Nix as your first round pick, or the New Orleans Saints and has Spencer Rattler as I think your 5th round pick, who was the next quarterback taken?
Yeah, I mean, I would have much rather taken in the 5th round, just because I don't think. I mean, I had Nix not even as a first round grade. I had him just right outside the top, mid 2nd round, 50s pick or something like that. So the fact that he went 12 was, I mean, a lot of people are, I guess, a lot higher. Obviously, they're a lot higher. They see a lot of flashes. Not saying that he's going to be Drew Brees, but the quick decision making, not have to make the big throws, the Sean Payton quick get the ball out of your hand type of offense, which is all good and everything. But I don't know if he's an NFL starting caliber quarterback is the biggest issue there. And so, yeah, when he went 12, I was just like, man, I was shocked. I mean, I thought, someone may sneak back up into the first round just to get that 5th-year option on the guy, but I figured it'd be like somewhere around the 27 and beyond, the final 5-6 picks of the first round. But yeah, it was kind of crazy to see that, and then not have your first defensive player taken until pick 16.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen that. It was Latu was the first defensive pick, 15th.
15, yeah. So it's just it was like the first 7 picks. I was like, man, this is kind of just exactly how I expected. Then they're like, Schefter comes on, and goes, they may be taking Michael Penix. I'm like, I heard the murmurs.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, they ain't doing it. They need defense. They need edge rushers. They need a lot of defense to help that team. You just signed Kirk Cousins. And when they took Penix, I was just like, well, you should be fired.
Yeah, so they've just fired their coach last year, correct?
Yeah.
the guy who they drafted. Why am I blank from Texas? Running back,
Bijan.
Bijan Robinson, and then they wouldn't play the dude.
Hmm.
This makes me, and we blame the coach for being an idiot. This makes me think more so that this is a bigger problem than the head coach not playing a running back that you drafted, that early. Now
Hmm.
you're going to tell me you're going to draft a quarterback that early and not play. It's so disconnected. It doesn't make any sense. Bo Nix, to me, I get it. He put up great numbers. The same problem I have with Michael Penix is the same problem I have with Bo Nix. The dude's been playing since 2018. And
Yeah.
when I was 2 years older than everybody else, I would have dominated any sport. Well, I mean, at least in the
Mm.
peers that we played with, anyways.
Yeah.
I would have been better. I was faster, smarter, stronger, all those things. Like, I understood the game
Hmm.
more. You should be dominating. I don't know. Give me who, I mean, so we know Caleb Williams, great job. The
Hmm.
Bears should be stoked. That poor franchise, they are set up. They just went 7-10 last year, I believe, and then now they're gonna have a chance to really make a push for that NFC North, possibly here in the next couple of years, make it,
Yeah.
their home. Jaden Daniels, Drake May, who do you like to fit for better in their throughout their rookie contract? Not just next year, but the next 4 to 5 years.
I like Drake May. I love Jaden Daniels. I think a lot of Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to be a good starting quarterback. But
Hmm.
I like the position that you get Drake May in. You signed Jacoby Brissett. I've been saying this for a couple weeks. I love the idea, whether or not we'll see it, maybe not. But I love the idea of letting the kid sit for the year, just because there's so many things that he needs to work on. His footwork, his reading the field, his decision making. He needs to work on that. Your team isn't ready to compete, so why throw him out there? Your offense line is, you drafted some good guys that could probably start for you in the next couple of years. I think they had a really good draft, the Patriots did, but you still don't have a team around him, and all you're doing is setting him up to fail early on, like we saw last year with the Panthers and Bryce Young. You
Hmm.
didn't have the pieces around him to let him, at least compete and be a decent NFL quarterback. He was so bad because the offense line was so bad. Didn't have the weapons around him. And that's kind of the same situation you got with the Patriots. They just didn't take him number one, but they took him three. So at least you have your guy there that can go out there and play good and be a decent NFL starting quarterback and let him sit. And then all you do is you're going to have a high pick next year and you build more around him. And then next year is when you transition him into the starting role. So I think if they're able to do that, if they're willing to do that, I think that position, that spot right there was the best quarterback spot that, outside of Caleb Williams that, any of those guys could have went to, especially Drake May going to New England if are willing to let him sit
Be
for the year.
patient. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. I mean, Drake May and Caleb. The reason why I would go Drake May is because it's the Patriots, and I can trust
Mm-hmm.
them a lot more than I can trust the management and the coaching and all that stuff that I've seen from the Washington
Mm-hmm.
Commanders. Part of the problem, I don't like Cliff Kingsbury. We've been very adamant about that. I don't think he's an
Mm-hmm.
NFL coordinator, let alone a head coach. I think he needs to go
Yeah.
back to college level and do his thing there. But that's what I worry about there with Jaden Daniels. We
Yeah.
just not seen it. As talented as he is, how good did Kyler Murray look with this scheme? And it's going to be very similar. So I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
I think if the Vikings are patient, the potential for JJ McCarthy to do really well is there. He's gotten better every single year in college. But
Mm-hmm.
my problem are the teams that he has played and the defenses he's played as he's gotten better are not good.
No,
and
they got worse.
I
Those
and
those
their
teams got
defense got
worse.
better, and so the gap
Mm-hmm.
got big. I just have a hard time trusting, is he for real, or is he
Yeah.
Zach Wilson, who's now a Denver Bronco?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. That's my thing. Yeah. JJ, and like, I don't know if they're going to be patient with him. Yeah, they signed Sam Howell, but for me, the way it sounded like is that Kevin O'Connell's like, yeah, man, this is our guy,
Hmm.
and they have some good pieces around him. You got JJ, you've got Addison, you got Hawkinson when he gets healthy, but the offensive line's still a little shaky. You still got
Hmm.
Christian Darrisaw, but Darrisaw hasn't shown the ability to stay on the field. You don't really have much of a run game behind him,
Hmm.
so yeah, Aaron Jones is there, but how much is Aaron Jones going to be on the field, which is a big reason why the Packers, were willing to let him walk. It's just I feel like you throw him in there way too early, we're going to see a lot of semblance of what we've seen over the last how many years. You throw the guy out there and he just sinks, and then he never never resurfaces.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to like rookie of the year, is that just straight up rookie? It's not AFC, NFC, correct?
No, yeah, it's just
Okay,
rookie
which
offense
is
and
good
defense.
because these are the rookies that are going to be out there to try to win rookie of the year in the NFC.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Michael Penix Jr. Technically, Rome Odunze, JJ McCarthy, uh, Bowers. He's not obviously, but that's just a stacked, talented side on
Mm-hmm.
the NFC. So when we talked about the AFC over the last couple of years being kind of the conference that this looks like it has the potential, if things go well for some of these teams, to
Yeah,
really kind of balance it out, balance where the
yeah.
quarterbacks are at, especially with Aaron Rodgers, who went over despite the fact that he was hurt last year. I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
maybe potentially balance it. So, um, let me ask you this: best pick outside of the top 10 that you saw in
Yeah,
the draft?
it was Quinyon Mitchell. I think he was my top defensive player in this year's draft.
Mhm.
The kid is so versatile, fast, long, rangy, physical. Is super smart. A lot of people just didn't hear about him until the last few months because he played at Toledo. He wasn't willing to transfer. He said, "I'm gonna build my legacy here, and I'm gonna put myself into the NFL. Even staying here." And he is able to do that. And him dropping to 20, I had him somewhere around the top 12.
Mhm.
I thought potentially that the Broncos could take him, pair him up with Surtain and have two of the best
Mhm.
corners in the NFL. And I thought if the Eagles were going to get him, they were going to have to trade up, or anyone in the back part that was going to have to trade up. And so for them just to fall into their lap was perfect for them because they absolutely just demolished the draft. What they did this year in this year's draft was just, I mean, they hit on every single pick, and you just have Quinyon Mitchell fall to you at number 20. It was a top potentially top 10 guy depending on who you're talking to, falling the bottom part of the draft to a team that desperately needed a corner. And I don't think you can think of a more perfect position for him or for the Eagles.
Yeah, Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, I mean him falling to second. I mean that's exactly the Eagles. You look at this draft and you're like, I mean, how do you get Cooper DeJean in the second round when pretty much every draft analyst you talk to was like, this is a surefire lock top, first round pick. You know,
Mhm.
we don't see him falling too much further, outside the top 20. And you get him in the second round to pair with Quinyon Mitchell, and then you turn around and Jalix Hunt is a kid that most people don't know of because he played at Houston Baptist. First player ever drafted out of Houston
Oh
Baptist.
yeah.
You get him in third round, great, potential edge rusher, Will Shipley, Ainias Smith, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Trevor Keegan, Johnny Wilson, a 6'7" wide receiver that I think a lot of people expected to go third, fourth round, drops to the sixth round, and then
Six.
you
Yeah.
get Dylan McMahon, in the sixth round. They absolutely just smashed this draft.
Mhm.
To me, it was the state of Pennsylvania. They knew how to draft this year, and they absolutely, I mean, both, the Steelers and the Eagles just absolutely killed this year's draft.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Ananias Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the Texas A&M that I can't get past, and just the lack of production because they seem to have fallen short. So my fear is that he is one of those guys that doesn't ever live
Mm-hmm.
up to the potential that he truly has. He's never really
Yeah.
been a red zone guy and anything like that too, finding the end zone. But you mentioned Pennsylvania, crushed it. What was it about the Steelers that you absolutely loved? And I will say this: even the experts are right there with you, Tubby. They are saying
Yeah.
absolutely Pennsylvania dominated the draft.
They knew what their inefficiencies were. They knew their offensive line was the biggest problem. In the last 2 years in the draft, they have built the offensive line, and
Mhm.
this draft they basically finished it off. You get a guy like Troy Fautanu, who a lot of people are saying he's guard. I think he stays at left tackle. And they may flip him to right tackle and move Broderick Jones over
Mhm.
to left tackle. But you drafted Broderick Jones in the first round. You get Troy Fautanu in the first round this year, who I had him as my third offensive tackle before it was all said and done. And then you get Zach Frazier, who I had as my second, interior offensive lineman, number 2 center. And then you get Roman Wilson, who I think a lot of people are weren't as high on because of the offense that he came from. He didn't have to produce and put up the huge numbers, but the route running, I've said it time and time again, route running for me wins over everything. And route running, this kid is special when it comes to the route running. He can play inside, outside. Pair him with George Pickens, who's going to take the top.
Mm-hmm.
This kid's going to probably play in the slot and be your little jitterbug on the inside, running across the middle. And then Peyton Wilson, someone I just like, the fact that he dropped as far as he did. I had him as my number 2 linebacker. I thought he was a surefire second round pick. And in fact, he dropped to the 3rd round. I think a lot of it had to do with the injuries. Mason McCormick, 4th round pick from South Dakota State. Kid has big upside, and like I said, I think they finished the rebuild of that offensive line in this draft, and then top it off with a guy like Logan Lee that all he does is just go out there and play hard. He really good in the run game, okay in the as a pass rusher, but not someone that you're going to rely on all the time. But if you can throw him in there on situational downs, maybe stop the run. And then Ryan Watts has a lot of upside as a corner, 6'3", 210-pound corner. If they can, figure out some of the inconsistencies that he has, you're talking about a good rotational corner in the 6th round. I mean, like you said, the state of Pennsylvania just blew everyone out of the water when it came to the draft this year.
Well, let me ask you this. There are 2 teams that are rebuilding, but in different ways this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is the Carolina Panthers, who last year's number 1 pick, Bryce Young, tried just to save his life. They took him out of the lineup for a little bit. It seemed like towards the end, just to keep him safe. Them alongside the Buffalo Bills, rebuilding in a sense, moving on from Stephon Diggs. They have not gotten over the hump yet of the AFC divisional round outside that 1 year. Who do you think built towards is going the right direction at this point?
So I like the Bills draft for the most part. I was okay with them trading back. I know a lot of people gave them a lot of flack for trading with the Chiefs so they could come up and get Xavier Worthy, and then trading with the Panthers so they could move up and get Xavier Legette. I was okay with them falling back because I thought Keon Coleman was a top 5 wide receiver. So I was okay with them being, that guy that they were targeting. They didn't get enough weapons outside of him. They needed more wide receivers because that wide receiver group is pretty
bad,
pathetic. Yeah,
and
I like some of the other
lots of wide receivers. They definitely had the potential to.
Yeah,
now, they've had injuries on the defensive side, which I think they tried to address, but just throwing that out there. Sorry,
but no, absolutely. Some of the picks they made were good and decent picks. I like what the Panthers did outside of maybe not getting enough offensive line help for Bryce Young, but they felt like they did enough during the offseason, which I still don't think that they did. I felt like they probably, in this draft with such deep offensive line, you could draft a couple guys in here and help build up that. But I like that they were able to go out there and get some offensive weapons. I like Xavier Legette. I think he could potentially turn into a poor man's AJ Brown. Maybe not the legit number 1 type wide receiver, but he's that big, physical, super fast, deceivingly fast for a guy his size. Jonathan Brooks was my top running back in this year's draft. The reason why he fell, the ACL injury definitely hurt him there. Jatavion Sanders, there's conflicting, depending on who you talk to, how they felt about it. I felt at least where they got him, it was a decent value pick, a kid that you just get the ball in his hands, he can make a lot of plays with the ball in his hands. He's really good after the catch tight end. So I thought they did a decent job there, but I think both of them failed at what they needed to do. The Bills needed to draft more weapons for Josh Allen. I thought the Panthers needed to draft some more protection for Bryce Young.
Yeah, and I will say Sanders, you think tight end, okay, maybe he can pass protect well and help out and be that extra guy. And that's not really his strong suit, I don't think. No. But he's capable, but he's not a Darnell Washington. Remember him?
No, yeah. Yeah,
no, he's still there.
He's not going to be your inline blocker that you line up to take a chip shot on like a TJ Watt or a big-time edge rusher. he's the guy that you're going to basically going to be your oversized slot receiver, and you're going to try to get the ball in his hands because he can make some plays and more likely going to be faster than a lot of those linebackers that may be covering him. He just may not be as strong enough is the biggest problem. 8 reps at 225 pounds is a big deal. For a tight end, a guy that big, he's got longer arms. I understand that, but you were only able to muscle out 8 reps. Kind of leaves me, a little concerned. And we've seen him not be able to stand up to some of those big hits, get hit across the middle and ends up, being a turnover for the team because he wasn't able to hold on to the football.
Well, let me throw this out there. We got to ask your dad. I know he's a Bears fan, and we already talked about the Bears, so we don't need to. But they had 5 total picks, right? One of those was a punter in the 4th round. Is he okay with that?
He wasn't happy about that.
I love it.
But I think the Bears had a great draft, honestly. The Torrey Taylor, 4th round, not what you're looking for. But for the most part, they hit on a lot of what they needed. You needed your quarterback, get you another stud wide receiver. I like the tackle from Yale. He'll need some refinement. But I think Austin Booker in the 5th round was one of the steals of the draft because I had him as a 2nd round grade. And he's a super raw, younger guy that doesn't have a whole lot of starting, history. He only started 8 games in his career, and all 8 games were this year after he transferred from Minnesota to Kansas. But he had a great year this year, and I think that a lot of teams saw some upside in him, but obviously not enough. Not like I think a lot of us, a lot of draft analysts saw. And so I think him dropping the 5th round and them going, okay, we believe this year's draft is so much better than next year's that we're willing to trade next year's, some next year's picks to get back into this draft. And we saw it happen a couple of times. The Dolphins, they traded a 3rd round pick for next year to move back up into the 4th round of this year's draft. I think it shows that this year's draft is so deep, and a lot of the draft, a lot of GMs, a lot of teams thought that they were willing to trade capital for next year, even if it was a full round higher pick for picks this year, because next year's draft, it just doesn't look like it's going to be anywhere close as deep as this year's draft.
Yeah. They traded up to get Jalen White. Right.
Yeah. Which, have a big problem with that. Yeah.
I don't think I'm trading for up in that scenario, like what you said, for that position specifically. I have a problem with. I get it. The context, not for that position with today's NFL, or a linebacker for that matter, like an inside linebacker. No.
Well, and the thing is, you just drafted, you traded a 3rd round pick for a 3rd running back. For your 3rd string running back. You have Mostert, you have Chan. Now you got Jalen Wright, but yet you just traded a 3rd round pick for next year's draft for this, for your 3rd string running back. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. That was one of my picks that I thought was just stupid.
It had to have been their running back, and they had to have known, because after that, there's a run of 5 picks or something, like 6 picks, where it's just running back. Like, so they had to have known, and that's the only reason why. But again, if it's plug and play, I don't know that that's really necessary. So all right. Are there any other of the teams that you really want to lean in on? I know America's team, the Cowboys, a lot of people love to talk about. The Lions, I don't know if we mention the Lions yet? They addressed the corners with their top 2 picks right away.
Yeah, the Lions, they had a really good draft. They take Terrion Arnold. They traded up in front of Green Bay. I think Green Bay was maybe leaning towards Terrion Arnold at that pick. They traded up, take Terrion Arnold, take Ennis Rankstraw. I thought that they addressed most of what they needed, because that secondary was a problem. My biggest issue was they didn't address the pass rusher opposite of Adrian Hutchinson.
Yeah.
And that they have really lacked. You could tell towards the end of the season, they just weren't able to get a lot of, pressure on it. Hutchinson went like a 6-week span without a sack, because the teams were like, well, we can just double him and not have to worry a whole lot about the other side of, the field. So I thought that they could have done something there, but I still think that they had a really good draft. I think the Patriots what the Patriots did was, they had a really good draft. Polk in the 2nd round. They drafted Caden Wallace and Leighton Robinson, I think, who both will eventually be starters in that team. They took Javon Baker in the 4th round, who I was super high on. I think that was a great, value pick there. And I think Joe Milton is an interesting pick. We double dip on some quarterbacks, and not saying it will ever come down to it's going to be May or Milton, type thing, but it's a guy that if he sits, maybe he can learn something and turn into because he's got the arm strength, he's got the smarts, he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He just has no touch or finesse on the football. So maybe you're able to teach something there, and then he turns into some trade bait later on.
It's one of those whenever you see the doubling up of quarterbacks, you think, would you rather be Drake May, Joe Milton, or Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix?
Yeah,
which side do you want to be on? Because for the record, we saw RG3 and then the 3rd round Kirk Cousins. Remember that? We were like, what are we doing? And then it turned out it was good depth. But again, that's the Washington now Commanders who doing classic Washington Commander things.
Yeah, I would definitely rather be Drake May, knowing that I was the third pick in the draft, and he was a 6th pick in the draft. 6th round pick in the draft. So I'd much rather be that, especially being the franchise quarterback for the Falcons, and you not letting me know until a minute before you make the pick that you're drafting a quarterback at 8th, and you're not doing enough to make the team better in a very winnable division.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Irrelevant this year, Jalen Key. Is he going to be an MVP candidate, Defensive Player of the Year candidate?
No.
Well, it's worth a shot with Brock Purdy. We got to ask the question.
Obviously the Jets were like super keen, and they knew exactly who they were taking, because a couple days ago, before when they traded Zach Wilson, I guess the Broncos were like, yeah, we'll just take the final pick in the draft. And the Jets were like, oh no, we're keeping that final pick. And they ended up trading a 6th round pick instead. So they were willing to deal a round higher pick because they wanted to keep Mr. Irrelevant for some
irrelevant reason.
Yeah. Makes no sense.
More likely to have a Brock Purdy type rise that late in the draft, Devin Leary with Baltimore Ravens or your Michael Pratt.
Oh,
both are set up. If they came in and they were and they didn't make mistakes, they could manage a game to a playoff run.
I'll say Michael Pratt just because I feel like he won't make the mistakes.
Okay.
Devin Leary.
Devin Leary did
a lot of interceptions, but I was pleasantly happy with the Michael Pratt because I wasn't happy about Sean Clifford. 7th round pick, a kid that smart, knows how to make plays. I think he immediately becomes our 2nd quarterback.
Yeah. It's an incredible draft recap, Tubby. Is there any final thoughts you have before we sign up? I'm going to have to run and get to work here in just a second. Okay. So I want to make sure I don't cut you off or anything like that. Was there anything that we missed?
I think that just a few teams that I think that just completely swung and missed. The Falcons, we've already kind of
absolutely
talked about them. I think the Bengals, I think they swung and missed. Amarius Mims, huge upside. Only played 8 games in his college career because of injuries. Titans, same thing. I think that you kind of swung and missed. We know me.
Get Mike Vrabel away from that. Brutal.
Yeah. J.C. Latham, 7th pick, I thought was absolutely way too high. T'Vondre Sweat, I love T'Vondre Sweat, but I just didn't feel like it was such a need. I felt like these teams didn't address what they needed to and kind of just swung and missed, especially the Falcons. I love the Braylon Trice, the 3rd round pick. Because the fact that he dropped to the 3rd round was great, but the fact that you draft Penix, don't draft another edge rusher until the 3rd round, and you drafted defensive tackle, and you had a chance to take the best defensive tackle in this draft in Jerzon Newton, and you don't take it. So I thought that they just completely whiffed on everything.
Yeah, that is. Sometimes it's those specific franchises that just don't seem to get it, and that's just whole different ballgame. But well, incredible draft. Again, we can't wait to continue breaking down. We got more sports news coming your way next week, so make sure you tune in. We'll be back again next Sunday at 6:30 at our normal time. Again, appreciate all y'all who jumped in at a different time because my schedule is a little bit weird. So Tubby, you're the best draft guy I know, so thank you so much
Appreciate
again
it.
for another incredible draft season.
I appreciate it. Now I will start building towards next year.
Yeah, you bet. And maybe next week we'll have a little who's the number 1 pick next year so we can give you something to look forward to a little bit there, Tubby. But if you
All
have
right.
not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube, on social media, wherever it is. Subscribe to the W Sports Podcast and share it with someone new. We truly appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Till then, we'll see y'all next week.
See ya.
See ya.